Hi, everybody. Welcome to yet another episode of Revenue Ramble. At Revenue Ramble, here we discuss everything that relates to B2B companies and revenue generation. We talk about GTM inefficiencies, what channels are working today, the tools that the companies are using, how AI is coming in, how it's impacting the GTM world, and more. Today, I'm super excited. We have Santosh Sharan. Currently, he is the COO of retention.com. Santosh and I have known each other for a good 5, 6 years at least. We have been in touch on and off. We are two fellow professionals in the B2B data space. Although B2B data space sounds big, it is not as big as it sounds. You have a few phases that you will see again and again, and is one of the most prominent phases when it comes to the data sales intelligence space. I'll give a quick run through, Santosh, just so that our listeners who already do not know, let them understand what I mean by you being in the data space. So Santosh was one of the OGs at ZoomInfo before ZoomInfo was discovered by Discover.org. You were there at what single digit millions when the company was doing. You grew it
That's
to
right.
tens of millions, 60 million, 70 million, something like that.
Yep. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and then you moved to Everstring, which was yet another data company, account intelligence. You did predictive before predictive was sexy. And then Everstring got acquired by ZoomInfo later on.
That's
And
right.
then you moved to Lead Genius, which is again a data first play. Lead Genius, you are the COO, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
You work with Mark there. And then you moved to Apollo. Apollo was on a pretty good trajectory, 2020, 2022 timeframe. You
Mhm.
grew it to from what? A few tens of millions in valuation to a unicorn.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then you went to Contact Out, which is again data play, but more for the recruiting space rather than the sales space.
Mhm.
And you were there for a couple of years, just under 2 years, I believe.
Yep.
And then now your latest gig is retention.com. You are the COO there.
That's right.
Wow.
Oh, thanks for that.
Just
Yeah. Go ahead. Complete.
I was just saying that out loud, right? You're also an advisor in what lead IQ. You have advised lead IQ, Lucia. Um, I don't know, like
Greenleaf.
pretty much, yeah, yeah,
A few
pretty much
more.
all the data companies that people know, you have been involved in some form or fashion.
That's true. That's and many other data companies that I don't mention on LinkedIn
Sure.
because so here's an interesting sort of detail about my career. By the way, thank you for the long introduction, and looking forward to this conversation. What I've done in the last 15 odd years is I switched jobs, but I kept the same industry,
Hmm.
and that gave me a lot of insights, right? Because I took like uh, playbooks from one company, applied it to another company, and then sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. And then I'm scratching my head, what did I do different here than the previous one? And then you begin to realize that no strategy is timeless, right? With time, buyers are changing the way they want to buy, the market's changing, the competitive dynamics, landscape's changing, your strategy has to kind of evolve. There are some lessons, but there are a lot of new and then the human factor and the team and the ambition, and that plays a very big role in
Right.
determining what playbook will work for which company. But I continue to get a lot of insights by applying the same old strategies into new companies. And in data, it's interesting, they're all selling the same data,
Right.
or more or less similar data. They're all selling to the same buyers and yet having very different results,
Of course.
right?
Yeah.
Which is what I have been trying to
Figure out.
optimize in the last decade or two.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, and when I speak to early career professionals, I tell this. They typically imagine that there is a salesperson who used to sell to one industry or one domain, and then they will go and take a totally different job in something else. And they kind of break that flow, right? They still can take their selling experience, but they lose the domain knowledge. And like you, I've been in sales tech and martech and data tech for the past 10, 12 years. I've never done the same thing again, but I've kind of did the adjacent things here and there. And over a period of time, I saw how it compounded, right? Your knowledge compounds, your relationship compounds, the
Right.
knowledge of the landscape compounds, and you know where the history was for that space. So you can kind of start seeing the future of that space. And that's where you start becoming super valuable to the world out there. So I think you're a good example when I talk to the folks next to say, hey, go look at Santosh and see if you can emulate something there.
Yeah,
Um,
what you said is insightful with regards to career advice, right? Because there are trends in every market verticals, and these are dominant trends, right? And they themselves change. But then there are like long tail trends, right, or non-dominant strategies, which are very difficult and subtle and hard to kind of anticipate unless you are part of the industry for like a decade or for a long period of time.
yeah, yeah. All right, let's actually start with that, right? You were part of the, let's say, the first phase of sales intelligence revolution back in 2010s or before that, about that time. And now you have seen this space evolve quite a bit in the past 10, 15 years. Um, at the highest level, right? Where do you think it is going? Where are these data companies going?
Yep, yep. Like they say, to predict the future, you have to look in the past, right? All the answers lies in the past. So I see data businesses, again, I see them in trends, in like macro trends. So if you roll back to like 40 years, right, and what transpired since then is kind of a consistent trend that will transpire in future. So if you allow me to just like explain what happened to data 40 years, 50 years ago, right? So it started with phone directories, right? So people, phone was becoming mainstream. So the data industry started with somebody digitizing the phone books, right, and making a CD-ROM and kind of making it searchable, right? But what with that phone book, what happened is there was no data of buyers. Suddenly there was a ton of data, right? So there was this 10-year period where market was like, this is the best thing that ever happened. The companies that invested in this became public and started doing like 350 million in revenue within a few years, right? Info USA led some of that revolution in a way. But then very, very quickly, what happened is that was what I would call a cycle of abundance of data, right? Very soon, first you have no data, right, which is scarcity of data, and then there is abundance of data, right? But then there's too much data. Now, if think about a sales rep, first they had nobody to call, then they had 100 people to call, then there are like 1,000, and then there are millions of people. Now who do you call, right? Where do you start? So that's where you start needing technology to create scarcity of data or to prioritize, right? And that led in the form of call centers that came up, right? So if you look at 80s, 90s, there were a lot of call centers, data companies that were basically calling buyers saying, hey, are you in market to buy a computer, or are you in market to buy a Xerox machine or a photocopier, right? And that is where the intent data was born, right? The first version of intent data was through calling, right? um, and then internet came, and so that created the scarcity or the priority to make sense in the abundance of data, right? When internet came, this is the original Zoom info. Jonathan got this idea of creating another scarcity, or another abundance, like what was done with the phone book, but now with the internet, with just scraping and so on. And that led to 20 years of abundance of data. Right now, we are at the end of that abundance, I see. So talking about future of data specifically, I think we are undergoing a phase where there's just too much data, and people are having a hard time making sense of data, right? And that's why you hear about intent a lot these days, or signals, because intent and signals are helping you narrow down the data to kind of make sense of who are the top 100 people I need to call. But that's on the data front. Yeah, happy to share some on the sales intelligence as well. I don't know if your question was related to data or.
No, I think, data is the fundamental aspect that powers the sales intelligence. There are different kinds of data and the engagements and signals. Let's continue down that path, Santosh. Like, so there's data and that gave birth to like sales intelligence, and sales intelligence kind of gave birth to these outbound campaigns. So I want you to, this is like really good. So just keep going from there. Let's get to sales intelligence and then let's get to sales engagement.
Right. So too much data. So 15 years ago, when we were starting to scrape the internet and bring in data that don't exist before that, right? So then it made sense to have this predictable revenue playbook where you could hire like inexperienced SDRs or like fresh out of college, right? Give them a tool stack and then have them send emails, and then some would respond and build a conversion model, and life was good, right? And it was
So this was 2010 to 2015.
this was yeah 10, like 2010
13 maybe.
2015, yeah, that
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
That's the
Outreach started becoming big in 2013 or so, right? So around that time, I guess, was when it became
right.
mainstream.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
the beginning of it. But then later, these two stacks matured, and there were billion-dollar companies that shaped up around it, and it did work. By the way, it actually did miracles to the sales team, right? To
yeah.
the point where we began to depend on it, right? And now it doesn't work.
Mhm. Are
So
you are you clearly saying it doesn't work? Are you meaning like in literal sense, or is it a superlative that you're using to make a point?
I am saying it doesn't work, like in literal
Okay.
sense. Like it simply doesn't work. So the cold outbound, I think we have lived. It has lived its time. And when I say it doesn't work, it doesn't mean nobody gets any response. I think it's not commercially so some people will have better result than other, but this is not a dominant or mainstream strategy anymore for sales
Mhm.
team. Or I wouldn't recommend a new, go-to-market team to use cold outbound as the dominant strategy, right? So, and there are multiple reasons and trends that's all pointing to this direction. Um, Data is certainly one of them, uh, but the other is, you know, with all this like cold outbound, buyers got upset because they were being since this morning, I have received like 6 phone calls that obviously I sent it to my voicemail, and it's only been what, like hour and a half since I started working.
Yeah.
Uh, it's just too much, right? So the buyers are shifting from sales led motions to like buyer led, right? The power of the is shifting to the buyers, right? So that's one reason it doesn't work. Our economy has shifted from like cheap capital during this time of data abundance. Capital was cheap, right? Interest rates were cheap. So what cheap capital does is people think there is more demand than there actually is in the market. It inflates like market, like TAM, the perception of TAM, right? Companies and start buying stuff they don't need, right? VCs start investing money because there's just too much money in the system, and they're all buying stuff that they don't need, and like velocity is important, and um, so all of that creates a perception where an inexperienced AE could feel like, hey, I'm like master of this trade because everything seems to work just so easy. You send a bunch of emails, some response, all that musical chair has stopped with high interest rates. Now the difference between success, top performers and the other, will only continue to rise, right? This time, the easy strategies won't work, the difficult ones will, and we can talk more about it.
Yeah.
But it does feel like we are at a pivot point in go to market. There's a
Interesting.
distinct before and after. um,
Interesting. Yeah, no, makes sense. I want to continue down this path, but I want to take a step back to something that you mentioned about intent. Of course, there was the earliest of the intent that you mentioned, but then in the recent past, let's say 2014 to 2024, there has been a ton of different kinds of intent data out there in the market that are available. What is your overall take about the third party intent?
Yep. Intent is another gold rush, that high quality, the value of high quality intent cannot be understated, right? Because think about, if you give me a bunch of leads or to a sales team saying, hey, I verify these guys are definitely going to buy, then why do I need a sales and marketing team? Why do I need a funnel? I just go down, I just make a call and sell, right?
Yeah.
So the very nature of good intent is demand always supply of good intent data, right? There's always going to be more demand than supply of intent data, right? But so you have to look at intent as a spectrum. There are good intent, but there's never going to be enough. And then there is all kind of bad intent, or I shouldn't call bad. Let's put it in a top of the funnel intent versus lower in the funnel intent, right? Top of the funnel intent is like content consumption. Somebody clicked on something on the internet. Does that mean they're going to buy a product? Very likely no, right? But then that also helps, because that helps you remember that model I said, abundance of data, scarcity of data, right? Abundance, scarcity, that's how our industry has been moving. So top of the funnel intent is like a search filter, right? If you have, like, in your search result, your ICP, there are like a million people show up in your data too. And then you apply who read an article on storage server. Doesn't mean they're going to buy storage server, so it's not high quality, but even a low quality intent serves its purpose. But if you get to higher quality intent, and those are more difficult to find and comprehend, then it's pure gold for sales team.
Yeah, so let me give you a set of different intent that I can think of, and then you give me like a one sentence answer on how you want to activate it, right? Let's start with the one that you mentioned, which is content read. So the data, the intent data that is derived from bitstream. If you have access to that data, how do you activate it?
So I would not consider it. I would not have any sales rep call those intent. I would just use it in a data tool to filter
As a
your
filter.
ICP and use it to. So it's not a very high quality intent. It
Yeah,
probably
so
one of
you
the
either
worst.
put it into an SDR kind of a campaign, or you put it to marketing nurtures or further marketing ads or things like that.
More
Very
towards
top of.
marketing.
Got it. More towards marketing. Understood. Then the next thing, there is the intent where people say that, okay, if you have been using CRM for like 12 months, then you are more likely to buy a marketing automation because you are maturing out. So technographics based intent.
Okay,
Where do you place that?
so that's great. So that is slightly higher quality intent. I would have SDRs call, because there is a lot more confidence. They did buy some set of tools that predictably you can make an inference that they're going to buy another tool. And sometimes this tech install intent can get more intricate as well, beyond the example you gave. But yeah, those are slightly higher quality.
Got it. How about the mid-funnel intent from like a G2, like somebody searched on a category on your page, checked out a competitor from a G2 or a trust radius? Where do you place that?
So that's where intent starts getting very interesting.
Mhm.
So there's G2, and then there are a few more lower in the funnel. But G2 is the beginning of the buyer's research phase. So this is where this is G2 is or trust radius, or one of the review intent is the beginning of the research phase for a buyer. And so just a side note, the way buyers do research is they're doing content binging, right? Within the same half an hour, they'll go to 10 competitor website and then choose only 2 to talk to. The rest 8 don't even get a chance to explain what they have. And then the buyer is going through it like all 10 websites in the same like 20 minutes, right? So this is where you catch that intent in like review sites. And then there are a few other ways to capture
Got
it.
it. So you think that's high quality intent. Then the next thing is obviously the first party, somebody is on the website and then you got the account, IP-based resolution or some cookie-based resolution happening so that you found that Okta is on your website. Where do you place that intent?
Right. So that is similar to like review sites. What buyers are
Next
doing,
level of review sites, maybe,
next
right?
level of review site type intent. So what buyers are doing is it's kind of a funny like sub trend where people used to check out each other's website. Now they check out review sites before they check out websites, right? So because
Right.
websites have gotten bulkier and companies are self-promoting themselves versus
Mhm.
customers are writing about the company, so it's more like better quality data on. So yeah, I would put it as similar to review sites.
Right. And would you want the SDRs to reach out to those companies? Is that the activation?
So yes, it's still valuable. I think they should. The problem is most of the time with G2 or companies visiting your website, you only know which domain visited. You don't know the
Which company?
exact individual. So then who do you reach out to,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So then
typically you put your buying committee in and then you just try to hopefully reach to the person. You try to hit like 10 people at that company or 20, depending on the
right,
size,
right.
and
So
then
then
hope
that's
that you will.
yeah. So
Fingers crossed.
that might work for smaller companies
Right.
where there's only like one, you know that if it's a marketing solution, VP marketing might know. But if it's a bigger company or mid-sized company that have thousands of employees, uh, guessing contact just won't work. We have seen it again and again.
Right. And this is where retention's new offering is coming in, which is a contact level resolution of the people who are visiting our websites. And I want to talk about it in detail. So let's keep that,
Sure.
downstream.
Yeah.
Finally, so the highest form of intent is probably somebody who is raising their hand by submitting a form for a demo or a free trial or like a
So
pricing.
I would add a couple more on
Okay.
before that.
Okay.
So there are a couple more intent solutions where um, you actually make a phone call. Like Tech Target has these websites that people visit and then they pick up the phone and call,
Yeah.
right? And or Netline used to do that, which got acquired by Informa.
Yeah.
They make so there are multiple companies that are calling using a call
Yeah.
center, which is very manual, so it cannot scale.
Yeah.
But that is why it's lower in the funnel. But they will share the call script with you, and I consider them pretty high intent because
Got
if
it.
you get an intent from that signal, and then the other intent, which is slightly weaker, is and it probably comes somewhere below G2 is white paper downloads or
Mhm.
when people are trying to when users or buyers they just read content that's high level just like a paragraph here and there versus they take all the trouble of comparing say a EMC storage server versus IBM storage server which is like a 16-page white paper, right? It does signal that they are slightly more interested in the topic and they're actually doing a comparison between two, so they may be in market to buy.
Yeah. So would you put that in the content syndication based intent? Is that where you would put that white paper intent or something like where somebody's coming to your website and downloading it? Which one is it?
So content syndication is okay. So white papers are also being downloaded in content syndication. Some of the content syndication leads are not white paper based, right? It's like any random content. So
Yeah.
you need to be a little bit more nuanced and make sure where the content syndication leads are coming. But in general, I would rate content syndication leads, especially if it's followed up by a phone call, better than
Right.
let's
Right.
say better than G2 and like website account based lead.
Interesting. Yeah, the other intent that comes to mind is ZoomInfo has this thing they brand as Scoops, wherein they actually send surveys to a selected number of decision makers with a gift card associated with it for them to fill in their priorities, needs, and things that they are looking to purchase. Again, to your point, it is you cannot send it to everybody in the world, so it's limited in the scale, but the quality
It's
is
high
pretty
quality.
high.
Yeah,
Yeah,
certainly.
yeah,
So that would be lower in the funnel intent as well.
understood. Yeah, the reason why I wanted to kind of slice out this intent on this pod is because most of the people treat all intent similar. They don't
Yeah,
understand where it is sourced from, and everybody will give it to SDRs and pick up the phone and make the call, and then they're like, "Yeah, this thing doesn't work," right?
doesn't work.
So Yeah,
exactly.
unless you have the nuances of this intent, and I wanted to kind of slice it out with you, we can put this out there so that people understand intent is just one bulky word for a ton of different kinds of data.
So one thing, if I can add, Arjun, and we can pick it up later when we talk about retention, is everything we discuss is third-party intent.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest innovation in intent that's going to happen is first-party intent, and not just what we are doing, but there's a several like spin-off of first-party intent that I don't see many people doing, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah. No, why don't we go there, right? From here, I think there are a couple of topics that I want to get to, but let's go into retention. So you've been at retention for a little bit of time. Historically, retention has been playing a bigger role in the B2C conversion
Yeah,
historically, but now you're moving into B2B. I would imagine spearheaded by you, where you are starting to give a first party intent, contact level resolution. Let's talk about that, right? Explain as to what you mean by first party intent and how retention is playing a game there.
sure. So historically, we have addressed the e-commerce shopping cart abandonment problem, which is a B2C type problem, right? In the meantime, I've been frustrated with many solutions that tell you which account visited your website, right? If you think about go to market in B2B, everything you do, including handing over business cards at events, everything leads to a traffic on your website, and then it's anonymous and you can't track, right? Less than 5% of your B2B website traffic is tracked using a HubSpot type pixel or some known. Most of the traffic is unknown, right? It's anonymous. So when I so what we are building is we are telling you exactly who visited your website at a contact level resolution, versus many other solutions are account level resolution, right? And the implications are pretty big. So we have already seen in the few weeks that we have been using it ourselves and some of our customers. Um, so in our case, there was one day we saw 5 people from a very large company that had like
Mhm.
5,000, 10,000 employees in different parts of the country kind of logged in our website around the same time, right?
Interesting. They were having a meeting.
Exactly. So it was very clear that we got the buying committee in a way, right? Popped up on our dashboard, and we called one of them, and they. So that's the other part is we get very high response rate, right? When we reach out to people that are visiting website, because so just to give you some numbers, our cold email campaign produces like 1% conversion, and when we
How
run
do you
this.
define conversion on that one? Into a meeting?
One positive, like a one sign up or like one person that's willing to take a demo. That's what we are calling conversion. So out of 100 emails we send, we see one that we get a positive uh, response. But when we send the exact same uh, cold email with no change, and we did this as an experiment for like 4 weeks, we saw a jump in. So for every 12 to 15 email, we were getting a conversion. So that's about 8 times,
Mm.
like 8% conversion, or 8 times higher response rate. And we try to have some conversations, and it turns out uh, people, the way buyers are working is they're doing research, and if we reach out to them during the research phase, like within 48 hours of their website visit, um, they respond back with the messages we are getting is like, hey, what are the chances, I was just thinking about you, right?
Mhm.
Or like, this is serendipity, right? And we
Yeah.
respond not selling anyway. So this is not a book a demo type email copy or trying to sell. We just respond saying, hey, are you looking for information on our like solutions like this? We are here as a resource, so if you'd like, we can offer more info or help you with yours, because we know they are in the buying stage, which is early stages. They've not made up their mind, right? Our goal is not to sell, but to make sure we are one of the candidates they're considering,
Got it.
right?
So I have a lot of follow-up questions. Let me start with one by one. This is a discussion that I saw on Twitter. Um, So this was a comment that I saw, right? Why is the retention.com guy? I guess, they don't know who everybody behind. Starting B2B business with equally weird compliance and privacy violations. Spelling is wrong, but that's okay. Um, like what is your answer? When somebody is coming to my website, you are able to identify the exact person using the cookie of the person.
Yeah.
Is that compliant? What is your answer to this?
So there is, I can since you understand data, you will get the response. I see why people get worried about privacy, um, but in the US, US is, as you know, is an opt-out territory, right? Europe is an opt-in territory. What that means is every data subject to be in your database, they have to provide consent ahead of time, right? In the US, most companies, and you've been part of Zoom Info or Apollo or others, none of them have any opt-in from the data subject that they have in their database, right? Because they don't need to, right? So if anyone is using any of the other data tools, they don't have opt-ins, right? In our case, we actually have some third-party opt-in because we are doing this in e-commerce. In some ways, we are actually caring a lot more about privacy than other data companies. Now, if we were doing this in Europe or some other territories that have strong GDPR regulations, yes, it may be difficult to do. So there is one. I can see that some people just don't like the idea of de-anonymization, but that's an idea. That's not legal issue, right? I mean, some people also don't like that they are in a massive database like Zoom Info or Apollo. But again, that's just a personal moral stance they're taking.
Mhm.
None of these companies are doing anything illegal, right? And neither are we.
Understood. Okay, that makes sense. And so from your standpoint, when now the other side of it, there's the compliance side, then there is the creepy side to it, right? When people think
Yes.
about it, there is a creepiness factor to it. So imagine that you came to my website, I saw that, and your solution will basically find the person and then send a Slack notification saying that Santosh Sharan, CEO of
Right.
retention, is on the website, and include your LinkedIn and the email. As I understand, that's
Right.
what you are going to push to me.
Right.
Now, I can pick up the phone and call you and say, "Hey, Santosh, thanks for visiting the website." And
Right.
you will probably freak out. An average person would probably freak
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
at that point. Like, how do you activate this data? Do you
So
explicitly
we
say that?
strongly,
Yeah.
yeah, so there are two sides to it. So let me answer your question in a minute, but
Yeah.
just to address the creepy side just prior to that. So without using a solution, you can recreate the whole process using multiple tools. For instance, you can cookie somebody. You can send them an email. If they click on a link using HubSpot cookie, you know who they are, drop a cookie. And then when
Yeah.
they visit your website, you know who they are, run it through a data tool like Apollo, Zoom Info, others, and then and then send it to Slack, right? And turns out many companies are already doing it, right?
Yeah.
It's not some rocket. All we have done is put it all together into one solution,
Yeah,
right?
but the big difference on that front would be that is still first party data because I sent an email using my tool. You clicked on my email, came to my website, and I am indexing
No,
you into
it's
my
not.
marketer.
Right, right. So the difference why it is not first party data in a way is you can start this process with just a list that you get, which is third party,
Right, that's fair.
right? And then you can
Yeah,
send emails to third party folks, right?
yeah,
And then if they
yeah.
come to the website, so but just to prove the point, because they're coming to the website either through email capture or directly to
Mhm.
the website. The point
Yeah,
I'm making is that third party contact that may not have any so most of the time people are interested in capturing new leads, right?
yeah.
It might seem equally creepy to that person, right?
Mhm.
If they haven't done business with you. So in terms of how do you activate this data, we strongly recommend our customers to not call or send that saying, "Hey, you visited our website on Wednesday 2 p.m."
Yeah,
I mean, that's not the point to kind of prove that we are watching you. The point is to help the buyers, right?
right.
And to help the buyers with the research, not even try to sell. So we strongly advise again, just like jumping over and like just trying to sell something, because the
Yeah.
buyers are trying to do this research, right? And if the buyer advocate or the salesperson, I mean, sales is the wrong terminology, maybe for marketing should be reaching out and offering further information to help with
Yeah.
the research phase. And buyers are
So
actually
you
grateful for that, receiving this email.
understood. So you think of this as a very high intent signal that you would activate based on, I there's a chance that this person is interested or this company is interested, just activate it normally rather than calling them up and saying that thanks for visiting the site.
Yeah, yes,
Understood.
certainly and you're right there. Nobody appreciates that there's
Yeah.
somebody in the bush
Monitoring.
watching with a binocular. But
Right.
that's not the point. Anyways, the point is to
Yeah.
help the buyer time. It's retargeting. It's no different than retargeting on Meta,
Or Google.
using the visits, whether you use MD5s and like go to Meta or through email.
Interesting. Yeah, the two other questions very quickly on this topic before we move on. What is the percentage resolution that you are offering? Like out of 100 people visiting my site, how many can you identify?
So it differs based on traffic, really. I mean, it's hard to give a standard, but from the audience that we are working with, and we have thousands of accounts using us now, we are seeing about 25%, 30%.
Hmm,
Now,
interesting.
of the visitors that we are able to convert. Now, it does vary based on your ICP, right? If it skews more towards the kind of people that say don't show up online, then
Yeah.
clearly we'll have less.
Yeah. And in terms of the accuracy, do you have a way to track that accuracy? And what is that? You found 25 people out of my 100. How many of them are the right people?
So there is some error, resolution error, and we are continuously, that's one area we work with. But fundamentally, the technology is such that, and you probably understand how the technology work given your background, right? We have to have seen them somewhere and ID'd them in order to recognize them on our customer's website, right?
Yeah.
So the error, there is some built-in error from the resolution on how we saw. And that's the part we are aggressively solving.
Yeah.
To answer your question, we don't see significant like errors. So if you ask me what is the accuracy, first it's a difficult question to answer with a lot of confidence. But from what we have seen, I think it's like the error margin maybe 5 to 7%.
Wow. Okay.
The rest we can consider accurate data. And
Yeah.
the reason I can say that is just knowing how the technology works and knowing what we are doing. We are just not blindly taking. Remember, we have a ton of data, probably one
Yeah.
of the largest amount of data amongst any data company. Given we have a lot of B2C data, B2B data, and we are seeing about 5 billion web and email interaction a day.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
can
So
mine all that to do something to improve our accuracy than what others who just just take it off a third party site or
yeah,
so
yeah.
we
You see a many number of observations, so it's not just see it once and then put it into the database. You just look at number of observations, the quality of source, and a bunch of other things I'm sure that you're doing to hopefully find and resolve. Okay, makes sense. That makes sense. Again, I don't. The intent of this piece of the pod was to kind of let people know that this is happening. You are not the only company doing it. I'm
yeah,
also starting to see other companies do it, which
yeah,
back in 2015, when I was running my first company, when I sent a cold email, I would get a stinger back saying that, how dare you write a cold email to me? This was to US buyers back in the day, right?
yeah, yeah,
But now send a cold email. They already know that it's coming from an outreach or a sales loft or an uphold. They already know it's coming from one
yeah,
of those
yeah.
tools. They are like, no, thank you. Right? It's like, yeah, this happens. My team is also sending the same. So will the world warm up to the first party for person level contact intent or not? Let's wait and see. But theoretically, I know that a lot of companies are looking for it.
Yeah. And this is a good segue to talk about other first party intent
Yes,
data,
please.
right? So you're right. Like even 15 years ago, in like early days of Zoom Info, you won't believe how many people thought sending cold email, was like a violation of privacy, right? And now nobody complains. There are public companies in this area. So I do think it's a matter of time. This may get normalized. And of course, there are some good practices. But to talking about first party intent, right? So, so here's another quick thought. Would you rather send cold email to somebody that is already visiting your website, right? Or to a third party list provider that's never visited your website, just random, right? I would say this is slightly better for spam and data privacy, and at least you're narrowing down. You're sending less email, right? Instead of sending 100,000 email, you're sending 1,000, right, to people that visited your website. So in a way, I think we are helping data privacy, but going to first party intent. So a lot of there's a lot of intent data that's right under the nose of these companies, that are buried in marketing automation, CRM, and other like customer success platforms, or their LinkedIn, or their website, right? The real value is in correlating, like creating a journey across this data that they're sitting on, and then deciphering intent. That's not what we are doing right now, but there's a ton of value there, and that's the long tail strategy. That's subtle, that's difficult to do. It's much easier to track a white paper download and call it an intent. Right? It's much more difficult to say, hey, we used to have somebody from this account that used to be our customer, and this guy was a user, now left a job and went into this company that's like this job change trigger, or right. And but then that leads to, so there's a ton of let me just stop there, signals that can be captured from first party data that companies are sitting on.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think two of the first party intent that I think are not that difficult to access, but companies still don't access, are one, what you mentioned as champion moves. Somebody bought your system, engaged with you, and then they move to a new company. You're not tracking it, right? There are companies, ZoomInfo has tracker, UserGems as a company. Every company now has like a champion move play or playbook that they are enabling for you. So it's fairly easy for you to activate it. The other big one that I see is all the closed lost conversations that you have had historically. People don't do anything with that, right? Closed lost is closed lost. You really have an opportunity to go back and talk to them somewhere between that 9th month to 12th month, because if they went with another vendor, that agreement is going to renew. Right now is the time to go back and say, hey, how did that go? Can we re-engage? There are very, very few companies that do that too. So these are two first party intent that are not that hard to activate, but I don't see enough companies doing it.
Yeah. If I can add a bolt on a couple more. So a lot of these call transcripts, right? These calls are valuable where there may be intelligence being shared. So unless it's actionable intelligence, the rep doesn't run with it, right? And then they forget, and it's buried in some call recording. But there's a ton that can be extracted. But the last one is really interesting for me, is job ads that companies do. There's a ton of buried information in this job ad. Like if you watch really carefully, especially for large companies where extracting signal is so difficult, these large companies in every, like if it's a marketing department and let's say your ICP is marketing, just watch like a hawk all the job ads that come. You'll see a change in priority emerge. Every quarter, they start saying, hey, and they start hiring different kind of people, right? And then LinkedIn data as well. So there's a lot of signals that companies are, I guess, sharing with the world. It's just nobody's watching. And this is where your AI plays a very big role in putting all of this together.
Yeah. So it's very interesting you said that. What we do at Docket is essentially a virtual sales engineer for B2B companies, right? So our job is to find the companies where sales enablement is active, solutions engineering is active. So we go into the job descriptions and we look at those companies that have a sales enablement role or a sales engineer role open right now or in the past 90 days, which means they are, basically investing in that segment or in that department. Pretty good proxy for us. we further go into job description and look for custom demos, things like that, where we know that the product is complicated or the service offering is complicated and they need sales engineers. That's another way. And you made an excellent point that we use exactly the LLMs to go into look at this job description, structure out the data to figure out the companies to go after. And at any given point of time, this set of companies is like 500 to 1000, 1200. Is that instead of looking after 60,000 companies, I always have 500 to 1000 companies I can go after.
That's brilliant.
So,
That's brilliant.
yeah.
What you just described, in the past, when we looked at third party like signals, we thought the same signal can apply for everybody out there, right? But now we are moving into a phase in our go-to-market evolution where every company has to really think hard what signal is more aligned to their business, right? And like you figured out a signal that's like that will work with yours, but not with other SaaS companies, or but everybody need to like sometime create their own signal or really have a good idea of what are the most important signals for them.
Yeah, one of the tools that I really like, which is coming up a lot, is clay.com these days. I'm sure you have also come across Clay. I met the founders and the head of growth, Varun, the other day in Bay Area. The thing that Clay enables us to do is it will enable to add a column where they have this thing called Clay agent, or like an LLM that you can use to structure out job descriptions, website data, and then specifically look for things and then enrich that particular column for you to kind of can be used for personalization, targeting, and things like that. So I'm not a, I'm just a small subscriber of Clay, nothing else with the company, but I kind of like how it's still very hard to use, and I've given this feedback to them too, but the product at its core is very good.
Oh, that's great. So we have a native integration with Clay. So if you use RB2B, the data, the website visit can get pushed into a Clay spreadsheet. So you can do a bunch of.
I saw you guys launch it 3 weeks back or something like that.
That's right.
Perfect. Okay. We are coming short on time, but there are a couple more things that I want to get to. This we can go on forever, but let me ask you one thing. So today you do a lot of your, lead generation through your LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
And you have come up with a strategy around it. Can you take us through? You also believe that is the future where world is going. So can you take us through what that is? What is your strategy there? How are you executing it? And tips or tricks for people who want to do it.
Sure. Can you give me just a second?
Sure.
I'm just working. So you may have to cut this part.
That's okay. That's okay.
My computer is behaving odd. So.
Okay. Yeah, we can still hear you, see you. All well. Take your time.
Here we go. I'm back. Okay.
Yeah. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Yeah. So you today you use a lot of your lead generation happens through LinkedIn, and you have created a strategy around it, and you are executing it. So why don't you talk quickly about what is the strategy, how are you executing it, the results that you are seeing, and any tips and tricks for people who want to start it?
Yeah. So this pivot that I mentioned in go-to-market, I think there's a strong. So we are going from cold selling to building a lot of trust, and what that involves is so look at it this way: we were getting some of the freshest employees at our end, like SDRs, who are young and relatively inexperienced, to talk to the or decision makers at our prospects or customers, right? And they don't want to talk to an SDR. Nothing wrong with SDR. They want to talk to execs, and nobody wants to come on calls, and they want their questions answered in a public one-to-many kind of forum, or talk one-on-one with execs. So the model that we built is we use LinkedIn to create that experience, right? So between Adam and I, we are posting. He does a lot more than I do, but we do get hundreds of thousands of impression every week. And then the most important part is the comment section, where we are essentially removing all objections, and in the process creating trust and credibility. But it doesn't stop there. That's what people see, right? As a result of these posts, I have had at least 150 to 200 conversations in the last 2-3 months with our prospects. And I do this one-on-one with the execs, with like VP and above of like our ICP companies. And that has worked miracles. And we have signed over 3,000 accounts in just like 30 days for our B2B solution. And that number is just growing wildly. And we haven't had any salesperson or any SDR as yet. I mean, in the long run we might, but to give you a sense, so the missing part which you don't see is we have a team to we are recreating this inbound lead that you see on the website, right? So so anybody that engages with our post, we consider it an engaged audience. So we find a way to match them with our ICP. And the most engaged audience that engage with either Adam or myself or our content, we send them a quick note saying, hey, do you want to chat? Or do you have questions? Do you want to try our product out? And some of them respond. And a lot of this is done through automation. But the ones that respond, we turn them into a lead, and automatically the event shows up on my calendar. So I've been blocking like 4 or 5 hours every day for like relentlessly for like a couple of months. And that's our go-to-market motion right now.
Awesome. And any tips for anybody who wants to start this?
Well, write a lot of content, because
how often do you suggest? A day, twice a day?
So I do once a week, and Adam does maybe 3 times a week. So few things we have learned is we don't use ghostwriters. We write our own content and we comment ourselves. It just brings authenticity, because these are the days when our brain is getting programmed to avoid ChatGPT type content, right? So even if there's a spelling mistake or slight grammatical error, people know this is like human generated content, right? So we don't, our brain is already programmed to tell, right? And then that affects engagement. So as a founder, you're basically telling a story, right? And you need, so let me share another paradigm to it. So, I recently wrote a post about it, right? There was a time when you would start a company, build a product, and then think about go to market, and then build a community or audience to sell to, right? Now, I think is the time to turn that completely upside down. You have an audience to start with. If I have to start something, I'll probably look at my audience and say, what does my audience want? So you build a community or audience first. That is your true product. And when they tell you what you want, and you can do this through content, right? And co-create your product, and then sell it back to the same audience that's engaged, right? And at least the initial adoption can come from that audience. We are seeing that ourselves, right? Now, we are also slightly behind the curve where we build the audience along the way. But in future, I see a lot of sales reps or founders starting companies in the audience they already have, because look, we are headed into a future where product is not a moat, right? The cost of building product will go down to literally zero.
Yeah.
Right. And then what is the moat then? So we complain that for every market segment, there are like 50 tools when the market only needs 5, right? Guess what? We are headed into a time when there'll be 200 tools, because there will be technologies, and if nobody's building, somebody should, where you just photocopy a product and build a source code in like 2 minutes. You just point it to a crawler to somebody's SaaS tool, and then you have the entire source code. You change the skin, and in 10 minutes you have a new product, right? And there's no way to avoid, right? That's where we are headed, right? So then it's really the community and the buyers and people that trust you and are engaged with you that matters.
Yeah, it's interesting. Long back there was this concept of Rolodex of salespeople. So whoever had a better Rolodex was the salesperson who got a better job at Microsoft's and the
Right.
IBMs of the world. Then the Rolodex became Zoom Info. Then now it's kind of going back to who is my audience, and that's my Rolodex. I can take it to multiple companies.
Very good
Super
metaphor.
interesting. Santosh, this was a blast. I had so much fun. I wish we had more time to go into bigger rabbit holes or deeper rabbit holes on pretty much all the topics that I mentioned or what that we discussed. But it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot for spending this kind of time. We spent like 55 minutes on this. So I really appreciate your time, Santosh. Thank you.
I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks, Arjun.
Thank you.